part.
Democrat Senator Davey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I associate myself and my party with the comments of the Foreign Secretary about the terrible rail crash in Spain? And can I thank her for her statement? Madam Deputy Speaker, President Trump is acting like an international gangster, threatening to trample over the sovereignty of an ally, threatening the end of NATO altogether, and now threatening to hit our country and 7 European allies with outrageous, damaging tariffs unless he gets his hands on Greenland. This is an incredibly grave moment for the United Kingdom, Europe and our world. Without provocation or justification, the President of the United States is attacking our economy, our livelihoods and our national security. Trump has put British businesses and jobs on the front line in his unprovoked aggression. The only people cheering him on are Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping. Only a few months ago, Trump hailed the special relationship at Windsor Castle. Now, thanks to his actions, it is nearly in tatters. So how do we stop Trump's damaging trade war? For a year now, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Prime Minister has tried a policy of appeasing Trump, flattering him, fawning over him, refusing to stand up to him, because, he argued, otherwise Trump would hit us with damaging tariffs. Well, the Prime Minister has tested his approach to destruction. It has failed. It is time for the government to change course. We have to finally be clear-eyed about the sort of man Trump is and treat him accordingly. He is a bully. He thinks he can grab whatever he wants, using force if necessary. And he is corrupt. The most corrupt president the United States has ever seen. So there are only 2 ways of getting him to back down: bribing him with a new jet perhaps, or a few billion in his crypto account, or standing up to him like we would with any other bully, standing together with our European allies to make him back down. That's the choice. Which one, Foreign Secretary?
Well, this is clearly a serious moment. I wonder if the honourable gentleman actually saw the Prime Minister's response this morning. And he should know that it is because this is a serious moment that we respond in a serious way. That this Prime Minister responds in a serious way, in a calm, robust and hard-headed way about what is in the UK's national interest, and also how we work together in the alliances that are crucial for our security, our prosperity, and also are underpinned by our values. That is why the Prime Minister has been so firm in the United Kingdom's response. It's why I welcomed the Danish Foreign Minister to London today. And I think that the honourable member's description of our Prime Minister's response and our UK government response is inappropriate. I would say I think this is a really important time for parties to come together on how we ensure that we can respond to the situation that we are in, that we can work closely with our allies, but that we can also create a constructive approach to our Arctic security, which ultimately will depend on transatlantic cooperation and ultimately will depend on ensuring that those alliances and that transatlantic alliance respects the principles of sovereignty and respects the principles of collective security. That is something we will do in a sober and serious way.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. What we're witnessing is a very rude awakening for European nations, including our own, that if you don't properly invest in sovereign capabilities for defence and security and rely instead on others, then sooner or later you will be bullied or blackmailed by larger nations. And the question for us is, are we just going to kick the can down the road and just trundle along with small, gradual increases in defence investment, or are we going to chart a path to 3% GDP defence spending in this Parliament? Now, in terms of Arctic security, the Foreign Secretary intimated that only one British officer was involved in the Danish-led Operation Arctic Endurance in Greenland. Could she please update the House as to our current and future planned participation, and are there any political or practical constraints in that future participation?
Secretary.
And the specific issue that he raised, it was not an operation, it was a planning process, as takes place very routinely, and that continues to be the case. What we are arguing for is a broader approach to Arctic security. In fact, the UK's strongest contribution is around the north of Norway. Our partnership with Norway is really now unrivalled. Both the commandos, the excellent work that I saw at Camp Viking and elsewhere, and also of the frigates, the joint frigates there. And that is our unrivalled. For a non-Arctic nation, our contribution to Arctic security is now unrivalled, and we see this as being part of Arctic Sentry, a wider approach to the collective Arctic security. But what I would also say is he raises the issue about investment. We are this is exactly why we are have put forward the biggest increase in defence spending for very many years.
Malthouse.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Foreign Secretary, I'm afraid, is being rather mealy-mouthed about a situation that the President of the United States obviously sees as very simple. He believes that either through extortion, and he's not denying that he may use military force to acquire Greenland, whichever way you look at it. So 2 questions. First of all, as she will know, there are significant military assets owned by the United States based here in the United Kingdom. Could they be used as part of an invasion of Greenland against our will? And secondly, does she recognise that when tariffs were first wielded as a weapon against the Canadians, we should have stood with them rather than cutting a snivelling deal?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, all I would say to him, first of all, is clearly that is not the situation that we are talking about. We have been very clear about the importance of both sovereignty and collective security, that this is not just part of the NATO alliance, that these are fundamental principles that we stand for as well. And in terms of the work around tariffs, as we'll know, the work the Prime Minister led has been effective in addressing tariffs in the past. We will show the same determination and robust approach again. Similarly, we have done so on other issues as well. It is important that we focus around the results that we can get by taking a hard-headed approach. That is what we're continuing to do.
Dame Chianwara.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Knocking on doors in Denton and Westerhope, Arthur's Hill and Wingrove, for the first time in my 15 years as an MP, the #1 issue was global insecurity. President Trump has succeeded in uniting the British people against his unwarranted attack on a close ally. Now, my right honourable friend is right to be calm and diplomatic, but will she reassure us that given the current President's volatility, she and her government will ensure that our sovereignty is not dependent on US capability, and specifically that our technology procurement, both civil and defence, will reflect this?
Well, my honourable friend is right to talk about the very strong feeling on this right across the UK, the very strong feeling for the sense of protecting sovereignty for the people of Greenland, for the people of Denmark more widely, and also the real deep sense that to have tariffs proposed in this way is just deeply wrong. It's also counterproductive to our collective security, but it is also deeply wrong. She also raises the issues about sort of UK resilience as well. She will know on things like the Five Eyes partnership, there is very deep, long-standing cooperation and shared technology, but there are also areas where we agree that Europe needs to do more for its own defence and its own investment as well, and that's what we're doing.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I declare an interest as Chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Greenland. President Trump's threat to annex Greenland, either the easy way or the hard way, is pushing Europe to the verge of one of the biggest political crises and security crises we've faced in decades. Now his threat to impose punitive tariffs on those opposing his illegal annexation means that the President of our closest ally is using economic and military threats against the UK and other European nations simply for defending sovereignty, self-determination and international law. So on what basis does this government view this particular President as being a trustworthy and reliable ally?
Secretary.
Well, we have made very clear that threats to Greenland's sovereignty are wrong. Threats on tariffs and on economic pressure are wrong because allies should stand together and not face the kinds of threats that we have seen. Particularly, that is an issue for the UK, but also particularly Denmark, that has been such a close ally to both the UK and the US as well. We are taking a very robust, hard-headed approach to this, to work through what is in the UK national interest and to get a resolution to this that can protect and defend and strengthen the Arctic security and also UK security more widely, and that is the right thing to do.
Colleagues need to shorten their questions. Many members want to get in, and that depends on the length of your questions. Alan Gemmell.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Foreign Secretary for setting out the UK's position on the future of Greenland for the people of Greenland and for the Danes to decide. It's not right that one of our closest and oldest allies threatens us with economic sanctions, and I have two questions for the Foreign Secretary. How will she explain to the US administration our interests and actions at this time and stop the sanctions and resolve the situation? And might she take an interest in the Franco-British fast jet replacement programme and a company called Aralis, so that we don't have to rely on a British solution, building on the excellent question from the member for Newcastle upon Tyne Central and West?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, I can say we have been very clear to the US and more widely about the importance of countries working together to strengthen security. That is exactly what Denmark has been seeking to do, to strengthen security of Greenland as part of strengthening Arctic security against the Russian threat. And that should be something which is recognised as important, recognised as valuable, where countries come together to do so, because Arctic security is a multilateral issue. It's not a unilateral issue, it's a multilateral issue. It will only be strengthened by countries working together. So this is about our interests on that shared collective security, but also our values in defending sovereignty and territorial integrity.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Foreign Secretary, the Prime Minister, NATO, the Danes and others have been commended for responding to this through the usual channels and through the usual means. And that would be fine if we had an occupant of the White House who understood all of that and who respected all of that. But he laughs now, not just behind his hand, but blatantly in our faces as a result of that. So whilst all of that continues, we need to try and work out what makes this man tick. He is thin-skinned, he has an ego, and he doesn't like to be embarrassed. Should the state visit go ahead this year? Should football teams play in American stadia for the World Cup? These are things which would embarrass the President at home. We now need to fight fire with fire.
Well, I think we heard from the Prime Minister the approach that he was taking this morning, and what I would say is that the approach that our Prime Minister has taken, the approach that this government has taken, has already led to very big changes in the United States' initial proposals on tariffs that were, as a result, substantially reduced and changed as a result of that engagement. We've also seen, as a result of the engagement, big changes in the US approach to Ukraine, where considerable work has been done now to secure agreements around security guarantees that have been immensely important. And that is as a result of continued engagement, not just by the Prime Minister, but others more widely. So we're clear about the importance of working in the UK's national interests and pursuing different issues around this in order to make sure that we protect UK businesses, UK prosperity, and also our shared values, including around sovereignty as well.
Bill Brickell.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And as a proud member of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly myself, can I thank the Foreign Secretary for her visit to our Marines at Camp Viking in Norway and her unequivocal stance on support for collective security with NATO at its heart. Now, I welcome the Rycroft review into foreign interference in our politics. So can I ask the Foreign Secretary, in the context of NATO and Arctic security, whether she agrees it's vitally important that we get to the bottom of the role that Russian money plays in trying to subvert our public discourse on these vitally important issues?
Foreign Secretary.
I know that honourable friend and also others have been raising this issue, particularly about the hybrid threats from Russia. So there are the direct threats that we see in the Arctic, but also these broader hybrid threats, which range from sabotage, including on undersea cables, but through to the foreign interference and information interference as well. I know that the Select Committee is doing important inquiry into this issue as well and look forward to its conclusions, but we have substantially increased UK sanctions to address some of these interference threats.
Edward Morello.
The post-war world order was based on the premise that like-minded Western liberal democracies would stand up for each other, that we would expand democracy wherever we saw it, that we would lower the barriers to free trade, and that through NATO we would engage in collective responsibility. An attack against one was an attack against all. It is clear that the President of the United States does not share these values. Does she not agree that the UK should be closening our military and economic bonds with European allies who do share those values?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, what I would say is the transatlantic security relationship of North America, US and Canada and Western Europe and the whole of Europe working together around security has been immensely important for a long time, and we still continue to have the shared interests, shared threats. For example, Arctic security is very clearly a shared security interest, but we are also strengthening our direct security and defence cooperation with Europe. That was part of the EU reset, was strengthening defence cooperation with our European allies, where we are bound by our close geography as well as our shared values and interests, and we will continue to strengthen those relationships.
Bergen.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Donald Trump's appalling threats to seize Greenland, along with his disgusting bombing of Venezuela, are a new form of gangster politics that are set out in his new national security strategy, which also speaks of boosting support for the far right across Europe. We have to deal with that reality, and Trump's threats of tariffs this weekend show how little we can rely on the so-called special relationship. So I want to ask the Foreign Secretary, instead of blindly following US policy, as we have all too often done in the past with disastrous consequences, isn't it now time to stand up to Trump and forge a new independent foreign policy based upon international law, peace and cooperation, important values that are the very antithesis of what Donald Trump stands for?
Can I just caution the honourable member against somehow suggesting equivalence in a whole series of different areas, and I obviously am disappointed he doesn't, as part of his discussions, recognise the scale of the threat from Russia, which is the most serious threat the UK faces.
Andrew Morrison.
We have to ride the Trump tiger as best we can until November 2028. But the future of Greenland is for Greenlanders. However, when she's talking to her Danish interlocutors, could she ever so gently point out that small countries like Denmark have historically spent very little
on their and on collective defence? And can she also perhaps equally gently admonish Denmark, since along with most member states of the European Union, it has administered something of a punishment beating to this country since 2016?
Well, I'm going to say to him that I was delighted to see the Danish Foreign Minister in London today. He is a friend, and Denmark is a close friend of the UK. Denmark also stood firm alongside the UK, alongside the US, and including putting their own armed forces' lives at risk in Afghanistan, in other conflicts, in order to support close allies. I think they have shown immense dedication to principles of collective security. They continue to show substantial support for Ukraine against Russia, and I would just strongly show Denmark the UK's support.
Calvin Bailey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This week's tensions highlight the strategic importance of the Greenland-Iceland-UK gap and the urgent need for Europeans to fill its gaps in being able to defend that space, which currently can only be done by the United States of America. So can she update us on the government's discussions with our European counterparts on strengthening our defence industries and any discussions on full access to SAFE?
My honourable friend has immense expertise in this area. He's right to highlight the Greenland-Iceland-UK gaps as being crucial to maintaining the security of the Atlantic, and as one which a lot of the Arctic security issues are based. But it's also exactly why the UK and Norway are now jointly building new frigates as part of a major investment programme, one of the biggest defence contracts we have ever had, but also not just investing in jobs in the UK, but crucially in an unrivalled partnership to strengthen our maritime security.
Hobhouse.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I will happily accept tariffs to oppose Trump and his corrupt regime. Not my words, but a Bath constituent who emailed me today. Does the Foreign Secretary not recognise the strong feelings of so many of our constituents who are ready to stand up to the bully that Donald Trump is and want this government to do the same?
Foreign Secretary.
I think across the country there are strong feelings and about the tariff threats that we have seen. It's why we have been very clear that they are completely wrong. I would also say that I think the impact of tariffs is felt on businesses, on consumers, on ordinary families in the US and in the UK. That is why, and in other European countries, that is why tariffs are completely counterproductive as well as being completely wrong.
Emma Lewell.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the Prime Minister's calm diplomacy this morning. It is right that only adversaries stand to gain from the fracturing of NATO. I know the government doesn't believe the US President is serious about using military force to seize Greenland, but even just in the last hour, he has refused to rule this out. And my right honourable friend will also know that the President spoke about wanting Greenland in his previous term in office. He has long been serious about this. As the UK is the lead nation in the Joint Expeditionary Force, can she assure me that alongside NATO-level discussions, we are also engaging fully with our JEF partners?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, I can tell her that we do regularly engage with the Joint Expeditionary Force partners. Indeed, there were meetings around the Joint Expeditionary Force last week, and I believe are further such meetings later this week as well, which of course the Ministry of Defence is heavily involved in supporting as well, exactly because we take these shared security issues so seriously. We know for a country like the UK, our security depends on the alliances that we build, including with close European allies through the JEF.
Alicia Kearns.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Greenland is being offered two options: to be sold or to be annexed. This is naked imperialism. The government of Greenland has made very clear that they will work with the US in any way that is necessary to protect our security and that of Europe's. But I'm afraid that beyond vague diplomatic assurances of diplomatic activity and claims of being hard-headed, as a result of today's statement, I am not any clearer on what the government is doing to keep us safe from these tariffs, but more importantly, to protect our security and the sovereignty of Greenland.
Foreign Secretary.
Well, what I would say to the honourable member, and I would be, actually, to be honest, I am surprised at that question from her, because she does have experience around foreign affairs, and she knows the way in which the diplomatic discussions take place and the urgency with which those discussions are taking place right now. She will understand the importance of those discussions. She will understand the importance of the collaboration with our allies and partners and the way in which those discussions take place. She will also have seen the results of taking a similar hard-headed and robust approach in previous issues and the previous discussions that we have taken and will continue to take forward. What I would also just say is that the people of Greenland, we have seen the protests on the streets in Greenland, we have seen the strong views expressed as well by the people of the Kingdom of Denmark more widely. We will continue to support them and their sovereignty.
Sonia Kamal.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The 2009 Greenland Self-Government Act, Chapter 8, Section 21, states decisions regarding Greenland's independence shall be taken by the people of Greenland. Therefore, no external coercion should be applied to their people. What steps is my right honourable friend taking with our European allies to ensure that the Greenland's Self-Government Act is respected and that no major power can pressure the Greenlanders over their constitutional status?
Well, I welcome my honourable friend's point, and this is exactly why my colleague, the Europe Minister, has been in touch with the Greenland Foreign Minister, and why I had many discussions today with the Danish Foreign Minister about our support for the sovereignty of the people of Greenland. It is for them to decide their future as part of, and for them and the Danes side by side to decide their future, and not for anyone else.
Martin Wrigley.
Mr. Speaker, I welcome the Foreign Secretary's approach, saying we should be working with our allies. I fear that Donald Trump does not agree with her, however. What is the government doing to harden our infrastructure? We are heavily dependent on several American IT systems. For example, Palantir, which is controlled by Peter Thiel, who is well into the coterie of Donald Trump's administration. We've seen with a sanction that they could switch off Microsoft providing services to the International Criminal Court. Will the government look into making Palantir not a single point of failure in our critical systems, in the health service, the defence and cabinet office, and now police?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, I can tell him that we do take immensely seriously all issues around critical national infrastructure. We do have long-standing areas, for example, in our security and intelligence Five Eyes partnerships, which do involve technology partnerships which go back very many generations. And in fact, I remember some of my first meetings with Five Eyes meetings in the US on this in over 25 years ago, and that technology and partnerships have strengthened since. But he is also right to say that we should look at key areas where critical national infrastructure needs to be strengthened as well.
Alex Sobel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to associate myself with the Foreign Secretary's statement that the future Greenland is a matter for the Greenlanders and the Danes and them alone. We all know that the geosecurity of the High North is because of Russia's threat to NATO. I'm really pleased you went to Norway last week, because in fact we have 2 Russian bases on NATO territory in Svalbard. What discussions did you have with her Norwegian counterparts about the possibility of ending the Russian presence on NATO territory in Svalbard?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, he's right to highlight the issues in the High North being about the Russian threats, and this has long been the case, but we have seen those threats grow. There was a time at the ending of the Cold War when I think everyone was optimistic that this might fundamentally change, and sadly, many years on, that has proven not to be the case, and it is why this partnership between the UK and Norway is crucial, and it's crucial for our security, but it's actually crucial for the security of the whole of NATO and of many of our allies as well. I can assure him we keep a range of issues under discussion.
Danny Kruger.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Foreign Secretary is, of course, absolutely right to insist that the future of Greenland is a question only for the people of Greenland. Does she acknowledge, though, that this crisis is the consequence of our weakness, of decades of failure on the part of Europe and the UK to invest in defence, and indeed a historic failure of statecraft on the part of the United Kingdom that saw one naval officer attend Greenland and have the consequence of 10% tariffs imposed on us? So she mentions this conversation she had in Scandinavia last week. Did she offer to do more than simply cooperate with our partners and neighbours, but to actually lead in the defence of Greenland by committing a proper joint expeditionary force led by the UK with the proper commitments to ensure the safety of Greenland?
Secretary.
Can I just say to the honourable member that the biggest threat to Arctic security comes from Russia. And he would have a lot more credibility in talking about any of these Arctic security issues if he and his new party would actually look inwards at themselves and do the long-needed investigation into Russian influence in their party.
Kerry McCarthy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the Prime Minister's strong response and the assurances we've heard from the Foreign Secretary today. She quite rightly made clear that Donald Trump's claims to need to possess Greenland for security reasons are complete and utter nonsense. The US already has access, and she talked about a multilateral approach to Arctic security. There is also the critical minerals element, which I suspect is also a great deal to do with his interest in the country. Can she say what we're doing to have a similar multilateral approach to critical minerals as we seek to divest from Chinese reliance?
And Foreign Secretary.
My honourable friend is right to raise there's the broader issue around critical minerals. You know that many of the issues around Greenland are long-term issues as opposed to immediate critical mineral issues. But there is a wider thing about ensuring that we have security around our critical mineral supply chains and needing to work with other countries to prevent any country having a chokehold around the supply of critical minerals. That is crucial in some of our issues around new green technologies, but it's also crucial more widely on our economic prosperity and economic security for the future.
Ben Spencer.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. All relationships, especially special relationships, need a foundation, must have a foundation of respect and mutual consent. What is the status within NATO of economic measures being used to force the annexation of a sovereign territory within NATO?
Well, NATO allies need to respect each other, and that is a core part of the NATO alliance. It is what makes the alliance effective, and to not do so simply aids our adversaries.
Joanna Baxter.
Deputy Speaker, I welcome both the Foreign Secretary's statement and the Prime Minister's remarks earlier this morning. It may be surprising that neither Greenland nor the Arctic were featured as a strategic priority in the United States' own national security strategy, which was published in November, but transatlantic trade did. So will the Secretary of State make clear to the United States administration that both its goals of prosperity and long-term security of the Arctic can only be achieved through close cooperation with allies rather than dangerous rhetoric and actions that risk weakening the collective strength on which we all rely?
I agree with my honourable friend because our economic prosperity for the UK, for Western Europe, for quite across Europe, but also for North America, including the US, Canada as our other NATO allies, our prosperity is strengthened by trade rather than tariffs. Our security is strengthened by the cooperation through NATO and by respect for each other's sovereignty and collective security.
Gavin Robinson.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Foreign Secretary is right to say that NATO allies should not threaten one another. She is also right to highlight the threat and potential harm caused by trade wars and tariffs imposed. But does she understand the bemusement on the Northern Ireland benches that while she talks strongly about sovereignty, it was this House that diminished the sovereignty of Northern Ireland and placed us into the European Union Customs Code? And I hope she recognises that there is a double-edged sword on tariffs for Northern Ireland. But Speaker Mike Johnson spoke at the weekend and he's addressing Parliament tomorrow. And he said very clearly that whilst he has heard what President Trump has said, he does not know what his aspirations are in relation to Greenland. Does she?
Secretary.
Well, what I hope that really everyone across, not just the US administration, across the US would agree is that we should have shared aspirations for our shared security in the Arctic and recognise that that includes respect for sovereignty, respect for that collective partnership, and also recognising that the nature of the Arctic security threat and how much of it is maritime as well depends on countries working together, because it depends on being able to address issues around the eastern end of the Arctic, around northern Norway, and around the western end of the Arctic and the Greenland-Iceland gap. It's only through having that cooperation that you can keep the Atlantic safe, you can keep all of our countries safe.
Dr. Peter Prinsley.
As possibly the only MP with American grandchildren, would the Secretary of State agree with me that whatever disagreements may arise between the government and the government of the United States about Greenland, the bonds of friendship and kinship between the peoples of this island and the peoples of the United States are historic, vital and enduring?
Foreign Secretary.
My honourable friend is exactly right to highlight the strength of our bonds, the people-to-people bonds, but also the deep historic bonds and the continuing cooperation bonds. Even today, the US and UK have been discussing issues around terrorism threats in northern Syria and needing to tackle Daesh and continued threats there. So we have so many different areas of shared interests and also that shared history, and that is why it is so important that we pursue this disagreement in a robust and constructive way now.
David Mundell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In pushing back against the tariffs, can the Foreign Secretary and others make clear to the US that it's not just the potential imposition of these tariffs, but it is the bandying about of the threat of the tariffs which is so disruptive and difficult for major British businesses, such as the Scotch whisky industry, that export to the US. And therefore, if they are just game playing or tactics, they are causing real damage right now.
I agree with the honourable member about the impact that threats can have, the instability that it can cause, but also the importance of us having some stability, some respect in relationships is actually a crucial underpinning of the economy.
Clive Efford.
Speaker, if this were a debate truly about the security of the Arctic, we would be talking about more than the sovereignty of the land of Greenland, which is clearly a matter for the Danes and the people of Greenland. But does she agree that our collective interests and security are best served through us working together collectively through NATO, rather than creating division in that alliance, which will only help those who want to do us harm?
I agree with my honourable friend very strongly on this, and I saw myself in the north of Norway the immense cooperation between the Royal Marines, the Commandos, and our Norwegian colleagues, and also they briefed me on the nature of where the threat issues and concerns are, and the way in which we need to respond to them, and also the way in which that response there to the north of Norway also helps with the security right at the other side of the Atlantic in the US and in Canada as well.
Mike Martin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Trump is certainly an unreliable, unpredictable ally, and his comments today or yesterday about the Norwegian leadership makes, I think, us all wonder whether he is of sound mind. What can you do? You have to deal with him. I'm sure it hasn't escaped the Foreign Secretary's notice that the messaging from Congress is quite different to the messaging from the White House, and some of those divisions were exposed, particularly before Christmas in the passing of the Defence Appropriations Act in America. Can she reassure me that conversations are being had, not just with the administration, but also right across Congress, where we have quite a lot of allies who are willing to support our position?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, the honourable member is right that there are many different perspectives across the US system, both in terms of in the administration and in Congress as well. As he will also know, we have always had very close engagement with all aspects of the US system, and including the engagement with Congress. And indeed, the House Speaker is in Parliament today.
Sarah Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to put on the record my gratitude for the leadership that the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary has shown on this issue as it is evolving. But does the Foreign Secretary share my confusion that any member of this House who claims to be a patriot would be off joining a party who blames NATO for starting the Ukraine war, whose leader admires Vladimir Putin, and whose leader in Wales is currently serving 10 years in prison for taking Russian bribes?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, I do agree with my honourable friend. We need to be very clear where the threat to our security, to UK security, comes from, and the threat from Russia to our security, be that through the Arctic or be that through Ukraine, and the impact that it has on Europe. So I think, frankly, the idea that members of this House who call themselves patriots have been left to join a party that is so soft on Russia, I think is just astonishing.
Dr. Ellie Charles.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Donald Trump rides roughshod over international law and international alliances. Now, the PM said the trade war is in no one's interest. Of course, but we all know that if you give ground to a bully, you get bullied even more. Does the Foreign Secretary recognise that after a full year of attempting to appease Donald Trump, that strategy has comprehensively failed, that it is time to replace submission to the US with strength and solidarity with our European partners, and that the UK needs to make clear to Donald Trump that there are red lines, and that if he engages in hostile activity towards the UK, that will have practical consequences, not least in trade?
Yeah.
Well, the UK security is strengthened by the NATO alliance, the transatlantic alliance. I know that there are some who want to reject Europe, there are some who want to reject the US and North America. We know that it is that transatlantic partnership that is what keeps us safe and is crucial. And that is why we believe in continuing with NATO. I know that there are some parties who want to ditch it.
Race.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to welcome the calm and robust approach to American allies on this issue from the Foreign Secretary and from the Prime Minister this morning. State sovereignty, respect for territorial integrity and the right of self-determination has been the bedrock of global affairs since the end of World War II. Indeed, it's why a Ukrainian victory against Russian aggression is so important for global stability. Can the Foreign Secretary set out how, in order to deter further Russian aggression on this continent as well, we are working with our high Arctic partners in Norway and in Finland, for example, to